I spit on corporations. They are woke and they are abusive of labor at the same time. So you're not going to get any defense from me or any conservative of big corporations. I can't stand them.
The Republican Party has desperately tried to reinvent and rebrand themselves as populists looking to take on the very corporations whose greed has driven economic inequality in America. But when push comes to shove, they show us exactly who they are. After all, the GOP has consistently served as the party that cheerleads corporate welfare, mergers and acquisitions, anti-labor deregulation, and corporate tax cuts. In fact, thanks to the ongoing UAW strike, conservative politicians are showing just how populist they really are by openly taking sides against the workers. We'll start with Donald Trump, who loves to run on populist rhetoric, but basically said that he's on his side when asked whether he supports the workers or the big three automakers.
My question for you, Mr. President, whose side are you on in this?
I'm on the side of making our country great. The auto workers are being sold down the river by their leadership, and their leadership should endorse Trump.
Their leadership, meaning the union leadership, should endorse Trump, because that's the most important thing in the world. Like, we're having a conversation about the tens of millions of dollars that the CEOs for the big three are making, whereas the actual workers have seen their wages stagnate, had basically engaged in all sorts of concessions after the economic collapse in order to help these companies survive. But no, the most important thing here is Donald Trump. It's amazing. Meanwhile, Republican Senator and presidential candidate Tim Scott chastised American workers by arguing that they don't know how to work hard anymore. He'd also want to take action against the striking workers. Now, if you can bear it, I know that his tone puts people to sleep, but just listen closely to what he has to say here.
We're seeing the UAW fight for more benefits and less hours working, more pay and fewer days on the job. It's a disconnect from work. And we have to find a way to encourage and inspire people to go back to work.
Ronald Reagan gave us a great example when federal employees decided they were going to strike. He said, you strike, you're fired. Simple concept to me.
Now, just keep in mind that you're hearing those statements from a United States senator who works maybe 6 months out of the year and is provided government health care. So you want to talk about benefits and pay? Come on. Now, former Vice President Mike Pence licked GM CEO Mary Barra's boots like the dog he is when Jake Tapper asked if her pay, which topped $29 million in 2021, was fair.
I just want to make sure I get an answer from you. Is that okay? Do you think that's fair?
Well, I think that ought to be left to the shareholders of that company. I'm somebody that believes in free enterprise.
Free enterprise. I mean, look, they're telling you exactly what they actually think. And I appreciate that. I like that a lot more than what we started this segment with, which was Dennis Prager pretending as if he wants to hold corporations accountable. I mean, for their wokeness, not for their business practices and essentially hoarding all the wealth for the executive team, while the very individuals who are doing the hard work and generating the revenue and profits see their wages stagnate. Now, last but definitely not least, Nikki Haley proudly referred to herself as a union buster when asked about the strike.
When you have the most pro-union president and he touts that he is emboldening the unions, this is what you get. And I'll tell you who pays for it is the taxpayers. In South Carolina as governor, I mean, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. I recruited Mercedes-Benz. I recruited Volvo. We had 5 international tire companies, but I was a union buster. I didn't want to bring in companies that were unionized simply because I didn't want to have that change the environment in our state.
Proud, self-described union buster Nikki Haley. Now look, to be fair, Nikki Haley has always been a loyalist to the corporate wing of the Republican Party. But she hasn't spoken out against the faux economic populism that's been growing within the party. In reality, regardless of the rhetoric Republican politicians use while campaigning, they're never serious about tackling the corporate greed that most constituents are in fact concerned about. That includes Republican voters. And to be sure, Americans across the political aisle are increasingly enraged by how difficult it is to make ends meet. That's why there's so much support for the United Auto Workers and their ongoing strike. Gallup found that 75% of Americans side with UAW members compared to just 19% who side with the auto companies. And Americans are also strongly supportive of unions overall. A Gallup poll from last month found that labor unions continue to enjoy high support in the United States, with 67% of Americans approving of them. The 67% of Americans who approve of labor unions today is down slightly from 71% a year ago, but marks the 5th straight year this reading has exceeded its long-term average of 62%. So while Republicans tell you who they are, either through their words or through their actions, you should believe them. Take Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk as examples. They both went one step further than just opposing the UAW strike. Let's watch Shapiro first.
When it comes to the auto manufacturers, they're all getting their lunch eaten by Tesla, which is a non-union shop. It is amazing how we can keep relearning the same lessons over and over and over again. Now, all the dolts who suggest that it's unions that made American life so wonderful during the 1950s, 1960s, it was the union job where you sat there for 10 hours a day doing riveting or whatever, and neglect the fact that a lot of those jobs, now is you sitting in an air-conditioned office doing another kind of job, and that your grandfather who had to sit out there in the factory doing the riveting would kill for your job right now. Put that aside. The fact is that the real reason America boomed during the 1950s is because every other place on earth was on fire during the 1940s.
Now, just keep in mind, it's amazing that he mentioned that the current auto workers have jobs that their parents and their grandparents would have dreamed about, which just is not true. In fact, back in the day, unionized auto workers had secured income that allowed them to live the American dream. That was the golden economic era of America, where simply being a factory worker at one of the big three allowed for you to purchase a home, provide for a family. You didn't even need a dual income household in order to make ends meet. So the idea that people from that generation would look at the jobs of today and think to themselves, God, I really wish I'd be overworked and underpaid. It's just laughable to say the least. And don't you think workers deserve a seat at the table to be able to negotiate not only their pay, but their working conditions, how they're treated by their employers? Look, and that's pretty bad. What you just watched was pretty bad, but sadly for Shapiro, Charlie Kirk outdid him.
I'm willing to say, you know what? I'm willing to strike a deal so that people in their 20s are gonna get next to nothing for future Social Security if it means we can balance the budget. Now, I totally understand if I were to say that about people in their 50s right now, there would be a revolt at our studio. Of all the issues that if I were to even touch, even allude to saying that a 1% adjustment of Social Security or Medicare, it would be a riot. For future retirees, people under the age of 45, we should absolutely raise the retirement age. I'm gonna say something very provocative. I'm not a fan of retirement. I don't think retirement is biblical. I think that if you retire, you should always be doing something. Not to say that you can't slow down, but you should be helping people, part-time work.
I don't care how biblical you think retirement is. We live in a country that actually supports the idea of a separation of church and state. But other than that, look, it's real easy for someone who literally sits his ass down and talks to a camera all day to say that we should raise the retirement age. But keep in mind that age discrimination is a big problem. So if you're a 50-year-old who gets laid off from your job, how difficult is it to get hired someplace else? And let's say you end up getting hired, but you're working a job that actually requires manual labor. You really want people to work till they're 75 freaking years old doing that kind of work? It's just untenable for some. And the idea that we have to work like crazy, pay into the system, and then get told, oh, sorry, you can't retire until you're basically close to death is ridiculous. But Republicans, please continue to tell Americans just what you think about their living conditions, how much they get paid, how much they get treated by their employers. I'm sure it'll bode real well for your party. And one final thing for Charlie Kirk. Understand that he is an avid supporter of Donald Trump, who really postures as someone who believes in protecting Social Security. Now, if Charlie Kirk really thought that Donald Trump wanted to protect Social Security, you think he'd be an avid supporter of his? Could it be that Charlie Kirk is fully aware that Donald Trump talks a big game on the campaign trail, but behind the scenes has no problem gutting the very social safety net programs that the vast majority of Americans favor? Just something to think about.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a Young Turk.